Hello, welcome
Hello.
to another episode of BuildOn Open Source. This is a show that's live on Twitch right now. It comes to you every 2 weeks, and we cover all the new and exciting updates from the open source community. My name's Derek. I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and I'm joined by the fabulous Rick.
Hello, everyone. Yes, and I'm also a developer advocate focusing on open source. And what a great start to the show, Derek. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've been practicing it for a very long time. So if you watched the show before, you'll notice that our backgrounds are a bit different today, and that's because we're on the road. And I'm actually
Where are you calling from, Derek? Tell us where you are.
I'm actually currently in a hotel room in Bangkok. Rick, what about yourself?
Well, I am here for the Open Source Summit in Dublin. So I am in a very nice part hotel, part apartment, and part hipster place. So I have a kitchen, so I've been cooking all week rather than having the normal stuff, and it's been great. Yeah, and I've been hanging out with loads of open source people.
Awesome. And getting your chef on at the same time. Love it. So if you're listening, this is a live show. So please let us know where you're listening, where you're watching from in the chat. And we'll have fun for the next hour around open source in the open source community. So Rick, would you like to tell everybody who's watching what we've got planned for today?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is going to be what we're going to show you today. So we're going to start off with a roundup of some of the cool open source projects and news from the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I think the last show was just during the holidays. We've done 3 newsletters since, and one was going to be published tomorrow. So we're going to show you the kind of the cream of the cream. Okay, so we'll do 10 minutes around that, and then we're going to kind of like sort of cover a new competition. We've got something that we would love to get your participation from. And then probably the thing really that I'm most excited about is we've got a guest.
We have a very special guest coming out to us all the way from Australia. It's a little bit of a hint there. So really looking forward to that, Rick. So without any further ado, shall we jump into our first section?
I think we should.
It worked.
It works. Fantastic. Those transitions, they get me every single time.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start off with a roundup. I'm going to kind of probably go back a few weeks, and I'm just going to cover, like I said, just the things that I think you really should start off with. So in episode 125, we had this open source project called AWS Goat, and it's a project that is really there to help guide you understand the threat landscape of cloud and your AWS environment specifically. So it provides a safe space in which you can explore that. So I definitely encourage people to check this out, because this takes a more developer-centric approach, and it will help you be better at doing your role. So I think it's a really, really good project to check out. So that's the first one I want to talk about.
Yep.
Then there's this one from Lars Jacobson. Remember the first epised, Derek?
Yeah. Lars.
With the X-ray CLI.
Yes, love that. ASCII art.
Yeah,
the last episode.
and he's back with another one, right?
Yeah,
he's back with another project. Yeah. And I like this one, okay, because people who have maybe not familiar with CloudWatch logs insights, right? You have to write queries, and you have to remember the syntax or syntax. What do you say?
Syntax is something that you pay for sand. I think you meant syntax. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Actually, back in the day, in our glorious Commodore 64 days, one of the demo crews used to be called Santac Terra, and I used to always love that name. But actually, if Santac Terra is out there listening by some chance, then get in touch, because we want to pay homage to your excellence in the past. Anyway, back to the CW logs insight. So what this allows you to do is it actually has some snippets of queries that you can paste in to get the goodness from your logs. And I tell you what, this is I've tried this, and it's amazing. So I definitely recommend checking this out if you're using CloudWatch logs. This is a great tool.
Nice.
So the other one I think is an interesting one is this one here. If anyone's doing any analytics work, especially proof of concept or evaluation, you'll know that one of the things you need to figure out is how to do some test or get a test data, right? And so Gary Staffen, who's a prolific writer in analytics, he's really great. He does great content. It's great. There's a really nice tool that allows you to do this really, really simply. So that's a kind of like a actually that's from the projects. I want to go all the way to the bottom now because in the newsletter I also cover blog posts, but also videos as well. And in this episode, in this edition rather, not episode, there is a video. Sorry for all the scrolling. Where we've got Cy Venom from the Containers team, is joined by a couple of folks from Spotify to talk about Backstage. Now, Backstage is an open source project that allows you to build portals for your internal developers to sort of document and show how to use your APIs, right? And it's a really cool project. Actually, Suzanne was here at Open Summit this week. I didn't get a chance to see her session, but she was talking about this very topic as well. And it's definitely worth checking out that video if you weren't aware or familiar with what Backstage is.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's kind of like that's kind of the roundup for 125. Let's go to 126 now.
Yep.
We've got, I think, the kind of probably the coolest project that happened last week, which is Event Ruler.
Yeah, this is very cool. Very, very interesting as well.
Cool, isn't it? It is interesting. It is interesting, and effectively, it's a open source library that allows you to effectively match rules to events and do this at scale. And we've got a competition later, so watch out for that because what we'd really like to do is see what you can do this and show us how you might use that. And so apart from the actual project, we've also got a couple of blog posts, one that we created, but also a really interesting one from Tim Bray, who is ex-AWS and was involved in the early days of that. So well worth reading that because it tells you a little bit about the history of the project.
Cool.
Then we've got this very interesting project from one of our colleagues, Sebastian Derrick. He's put this project together. So probably only of interest to Mac users. It helps you install Xcode from the command line. I've been trying it out over the last week and helping Sebastian iron out a few kinks. But it's very useful. No longer do I have to go into the App Store to do this. It can just do it through the command line, which is like manna from heaven. And I really like the way that it uses AWS services like Secret Manager to cache your credentials, right? So
I haven't tried it yet, but the concept is fantastic. Because when you usually start developing for Mac and for iOS, the setup takes ages. It's just fiddly and it's annoying. So this is pretty cool. Looking forward to playing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I found. I would definitely use this to manage that. I like it to the for those people who use Node or Python, virtual env and NVM, right? So you can install from the command line multiple different versions of Node and Python. And actually for Java as well, there's a version of Java. I can't remember what the tool's called now, but you can switch very easily between and install new versions of OpenJDK through the command line. So I think it feels very much like that. So super useful if you're if you're a Mac developer. If you're not, then sorry.
Just had a comment in the chat from Testrycat. It's like starting with Mac OS CI/CD tomorrow. You couldn't have timed this better, could you? So give it.
Well, actually, so on that, definitely check out Sebastian's content because I believe in the past or even up and coming event, he's going to be doing some CI/CD stuff with Macs as well. So definitely keep an eye out for stuff he's doing.
Yeah, awesome. I actually had back to Event Ruler. I just remembered somebody was asking me what would be the use case over Event Bridge. What was what do you think the actual implementation, if you were to use it, what would that look like? Where would you run it on?
Well, that's a very good question, and I don't really have a good answer for that at the moment. But I guess perhaps if you're wanting to integrate your own systems with Event Bridge, maybe this could be a good way of doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think so. So one of the reasons why we've got the competition, okay, is we want to see how people might use this, right? So don't want to give too much away. We'll talk about that when we do the competition. But yeah, I think that is I think we need to kind of like see more people sort of taking this and using it to either integrate with EventBridge or doing stuff from EventBridge out to other systems. I think. I guess the other thing as well to think to know about Event Rule at the moment is Java. It's a Java library. So if you're a Java developer, great. If you're not, then maybe it's a good time to experiment.
Learn Java or relearn Java.
So Java has never been more popular. It's still very relevant today, despite what a lot of people say. It's a fantastic language. I've got a lot of love for Java.
Yeah. So, Java love. I can feel it from here all the way in Thailand, from Dublin.
Yeah, I know, Joe. I know you and your .NET crew. You go sit in the corner.
Okay.
So just moving for the purpose of time, I want to talk a couple of other projects.
We do ramble. I'm sorry, folks.
So a couple of other ones on this one which are interesting. So Socky Snapshotter is not really a project you need to know about and you would use yourself, right? But it is really interesting because it solves one of these problems around how do you accelerate the time it takes to start a container. So, if you update container images, one of the kind of the equivalent cold start, I guess, problem. It's not a cold start problem, but the first time you run a container, it has to download that image. And what Socky Snapshot? It's easy for me to say.
It is a cool name, but it's a tongue twister.
Yeah. The Socky Snapshotter, if that's how you say it, I don't know. It might be Saucy or I don't know. SOCI. I don't know. Snooky. Yes, Snooky. Yeah. Yeah, and so what it does, it actually optimizes how the images are lazy loaded, right? So it means that your startup time should, in theory, be much quicker, and that is super useful for bridging the gap as to when potentially you might want to use containers versus something like AWS Lambda functions for your for your code, right? So interesting, not something maybe you directly use yourself, but to be aware of and how that actually works is super interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the Credentials Fetcher is also a really nice little a new project that was released a couple of weeks ago. That if you're working with in a kind of Active Directory environment and you have all your security credentials and security groups that are there, allows your Linux environments through this daemon to actually integrate and then retrieve that information for your application. So that's super useful. Yeah, it's very handy, and we like that. We like that a lot. And then we've got kind of the current. So this is going to be published on Monday. So again, a reminder: if you at the very end, we'll publish a link for feedback. If you do that feedback, you'll get access to this before then. And we've got some cool stuff. So the first one I want to talk about is AWS Lambda Live Tuner. So Alex Casabona, he used to be in our team and now is in the events, the keynote team. He had this really cool project called Lambda Power Tuner, which I'm not sure if you've used, Derek, but it is pretty awesome, right?
I have. It's very cool.
It's very cool, right? And for those people who aren't familiar with it, basically it allows you to take one of your Lambda functions and then create a graph of different configurations, memory size, and plot basically a price performance graph that basically allows you to make a choice as to whether you want a cheaper version of that function or a more performant version. But that works, you have to do that yourself. You have to run it, and invoke it as part of maybe your testing. This does it, kind of like in real time, which is super cool, right? What? So I think exactly, yeah. That was my.
WTF? Excuse my language.
Indeed, you're excused.
That's cool.
So yeah, so super interesting, right? That's a super interesting project for people to check out. Now, what other ones we've got this week? We've got obviously people know that I've love these little tools that allow you to sort of work on the CLI, and Surf is a new one from Isan Rivkin. I hope I pronounced your name properly. That allows you to do a CLI search across your infrastructure, and the repo actually's got examples, but effectively think of it like grep. So you can it works with multiple cloud providers, so including AWS, and it allows you to find stuff that you ordinarily can't remember where you put, which is normally what happens to me.
Like every day.
Yeah. Where did I put that EC2 instance?
What was I thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's interesting. Now, this one, which actually I had to do a double take because of the name, Seg.
Oh yeah, it's missing a constant.
It is. It is, Derek. For those people who watch far too much TikTok will get that reference. This is a step function express graph generator, which actually visualizes step functions. And there's a nice little video that shows this working. So a nice little tool there, which I think for people who are into serverless and creating step functions, I think it's going to be a really, really useful tool. And actually, yeah.
So we have, you can visualize step functions inside the AWS toolkit in your IDE. What's the difference here?
This is more, I think, a debugging tool as opposed to when you're in the actual workbench where you actually create them. I think that's the main difference. So okay, cool. Yeah. So then we've also got some sample projects. But what I want to talk about, I think it's here somewhere, is a blog post. I think I've got to try and find it now. It's a blog post. This blog post is definitely a must-read this week. I'm a big fan of Firecracker. It's an amazing technology. Underpins, every time you fire a Lambda function underneath that is powered by Firecracker. And this takes a view from a security perspective around how exploring the kind of the attack surface of Firecracker, and it dives super deep and actually teaches you and doesn't make any assumptions about your knowledge around virtualization, but really does a great job at unpacking it all. And so I definitely think it's a really good blog post to read for folks who like to catch up on the kind of the latest open source blog post. So that's super interesting. And then I can't actually find it. I think I know where it is. It's at the in the quick update section, I think. Quick update. Nope. No, where is it? I don't know where it's gone actually. Okay. So let's talk about it in this context.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
So we updated. So Kubernetes has a thing called ACK. There's a project we created, and effectively it's a controller plugin that allows you to provision AWS resources. Now, what was launched, I think it was last week, was 5 additional resources that you can actually control from within the Kubernetes ACK plugin that we create. So I think if you're into Kubernetes, then that's definitely worth checking out, the new ones, because obviously it's much easier to manage that within your Kubernetes manifest files than having to then have a separate thing to provision them and then use them within Kubernetes. And then the final thing is this video here from the Containers from the Couch crew. If you haven't subscribed to that channel, you should.
Yes.
But this dives deep into Carpenter. They're evolving and updating that project all the time. And effectively, Carpenter is a autoscaler for Kubernetes that allows you to do some really, really cool things and helps you optimize around performance. But also in this video, they cover how you can optimize against cost as well. So definitely worth checking out that video. So that's
so you can just to reiterate, Rick, before we move on, Containers from the Couch is another show on the AWS Twitch channel. So if you want to know when it is, just check the schedule, and you'll find when the next episode is. Very, very good.
Yeah. And so so that's pretty much a roundup, really. So this is the latest one. It's not published yet. I'll be publishing it on Monday. So if you want to get access to this before everyone else, then stay tuned for the link at the end, and you'll get it when you complete the survey. The survey will take you about 30 seconds to complete. It's 5 questions. So hopefully some of you will be able to do that and then get access to the thing. So really, awesome. Derek, that's the roundup.
That's the roundup for the week. So it's time to bring in our very special guest. But first, let's transition to our new section. This is the first time we've run this, by the way. So very exciting. Welcome, Ian McKay, to the show.
Everyone.
Hello.
Yourself to introduce yourself to the viewers, Ian.
Sure thing. My name's Ian McKay. I'm a AWS community hero and Amazon Partner Network Ambassador, which means I talk to the community a lot. I do a lot of things in open source, as you might have guessed. And I love engaging with everyone, both from the Amazon side and from the community.
Yeah, cool. Because you're in open source, you're in the right place, Ian.
Yeah. And actually, you know, you're being very modest, Ian. You're being very modest because you've done some amazing open source projects over the years, right? And we've also featured you on the AWS Open Source blog with one of your projects that you may or may not be talking about today. But you know, you've been a great you know, ambassador really for open source, I think, and AWS over the years.
And there's a reason why you're our first guest, because you are prolific, sir, prolific.
Yeah.
So Ian,
yeah,
where are you calling us from? Because obviously you know that Derek's in Bangkok and I'm in Ireland. Where are you?
I'm completing the circle. So I'm in Sydney, Australia right now. I'm joining Derek, but Derek's on the other side of the country generally, so we can kind of get a little bit misaligned. But yeah, representing the Australian contingent today.
Cool.
Cool. Yep. So so people who are just joining us, you've missed so the first 20 minutes of BuildOn Open Source. So this is a bi-weekly Twitch show that comes to you, and we bring you all the latest and greatest from the open source community. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Ian McKay, who's going to take us through some of his projects. So Ian, I think we'll just throw it over to you.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, great. Hopefully my screen share will be working for everyone on the call, but if it doesn't, someone's going to yell out. So there's a few projects I'm going to take you through today. And these are all on my open source GitHub area. So if you want to follow me, I'm on github.com/IANN0036. And that's where you can find a bunch of my projects and links to some of my other spaces, and they'll be in the show notes as well. But I wanted to take you through a bit of a story which kind of led me to a bunch of these projects. One of the very first things I kind of went through is working with actually Media Live service. And I was working on this weird API call, and it was very long. It was to create a channel, and it was something like 6 pages long. It took me about an hour to figure out all the different parameters and get that right. And I thought, there's really got to be a better way of doing this. And one of the things I created was the AWS console recorder. The AWS console recorder is actually a tool which has now been superseded. But the original premise of this was that you could go to your AWS console, hit record on a little button, and then get an output of all the actions that were made during that session. And that would output things like Python and CloudFormation, and even IAM policies in certain circumstances. And yeah, that was a really interesting project for me.
Cool.
There's
Ian, just on that, you know, we talk about, you know, open source projects starting by developers scratching an itch. So I guess here, this is like this. So this is the problem that you were having, right? You were frustrated by that you felt you couldn't access or couldn't understand how to interact with this AWS service. So for people who are maybe not familiar with Media Live, what does it do? Media
Live is a service which allows you to do broadcast quality streaming, just like you might be seeing on Twitch today, of video and content. So of specifically live video, media and content. So Media Live would be an example of the type of thing you might be seeing on Twitch by some streamers. Okay. I just happened to be working on that for a client project at the time, and it was just one of those things where I got really frustrated with this thing, and I thought, well, I can look at the network calls that this console is making, kind of suss it out, but I wanted a way to do that in the future. And so I started making this, kind of cobbling it together as a little like proof of concept demo. This is usually kind of how I start open source projects. There's this weird thing I want to try out. It starts off really convoluted, and then all of a sudden it's just, oh, this could really be a thing. Like this could really work for
light bulb moment,
for a big contingent. And you know, so I started mapping these calls. There was over 1,000 calls for this project, and it took me maybe 3 or 4 months to actually start building out all these different calls and all these different services and get a pretty basic coverage. And then I started talking to the community. I was featured on a couple of different podcasts and things like that about how cool this tool was. And I started to get feedback from people that are using the tool and go, but what if we've, as a developer, already made these resources, and I don't want to, burden them with re-recording what they did and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have a solution for that, but I knew it was possible by just doing, CLI calls and things like that. There was an actual AWS project that was in beta but never actually got released called CloudFormer at the time. And CloudFormer basically enumerated your account by doing some get calls, some list calls, and things like that, and generating a CloudFormation template from those things. And I thought that was really cool, but I really want that to be comprehensive. I really want it to work for a bunch of different things. And so what I did, I actually went ahead and made that as a separate project, which is the more maintained version of the console recorder. And that's Forma 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's what we had you write the blog post about, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So I've done blog posts on the AWS blog, the open source blog, I'm pretty sure, on this and how you can set it up and how you can use this in your own environment. So if you wanted a bit of a deeper dive into that, then we'll have that in the show notes.
I've used it. I actually used it, Ian. Okay. When the managed Apache workflows service was launched, and there was not really detailed documentation about how to get CloudFormation working with it, I actually used Forma 2. I thought I'm going to kick the tires with this thing and see if I can use it to help me figure out how to configure it. And you know what? It was amazing. It worked. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And internally, when we published your blog post, I had lots of teams saying, "Oh, can you tell me more about Forma 2? Because I think one of my customers really wants to use it." So you definitely captured something there when you release this project.
Yeah, I think it's really capturing that frustration of new services that you might not be aware of, that you might have experimented with, but then you want to take the next step and try and do the right thing, which is put your infrastructure as infrastructure as code. And so this is a more broader interface to do just that. And so I'll take you through basically how that works today. So awesome. If you go to formado.com right now, you can access this interface. There's a little bit of a setup, but I'll take you through that. But this is basically what you need to do. You don't need to install anything directly locally. It all happens within the browser. So when you join Forma 2, you hit this welcome screen if you haven't been there before, or if you have been there, it'll land you straight on the dashboard. The reason that is that there's some initial setup work for Forma 2. The first thing you need to do is install these helpers. These are browser extensions for Chrome or Firefox or Edge. And the reason these need to be installed is that there's a lot of endpoints that are not CORS compatible in the AWS landscape. And so this kind of bridges the gap for you. It doesn't send your credentials anywhere other than to the AWS services. And you can even take this and compile your own version because, of course, the extension is open source as well.
Exactly.
So the fact that I've got these extensions installed is fine. You would then go and continue to your credentials page where you would enter whatever you want, whatever credentials you have to do this. I recommend that you use the read-only access policy to have your credentials set up there. And I have got a little IAM user for that. But you can also use session credentials and assume role ARNs and source identities and whatever kind of credential thing you have. Because a lot of the time you'll be doing this and it's very ephemeral. You only need this for a few minutes at a time. Yep. And once you've entered that, that's all you need. You can actually go to the dashboard from there. And this is kind of what you'd be familiar with if you used to use the AWS console and let it on the homepage. This still exists, by the way. It's just really hard to get to. But yeah, this is just a listing of services. So I'm in the Sydney region right now, and I can just hit this button up here that says Scan Account. And what this actually does, it actually goes ahead and goes through all of these services and figures out what's in your account, whether that be EC2 instances or Lambdas or IAM policies and things like that. And then what you can do after that's finished scanning, or I can cheat and go now, is go to the a Lambda function here. I can look at that function and see what it does, the properties of it rather. And then I can select this, add that to my template. And sometimes you get this pop-up as well. And this is actually recognizing that there's multiple different things associated with what you're working with. In this case, it's permissions. As you can see, there's more populating in as we speak because the scan's running. So then I can take this and then pretty easily generate a template from that just by hitting this generate button. And what this gives me is a full CloudFormation template of what I've created, possibly manually in the AWS console. And that includes the type, the properties, handler, and everything else that's related. One of the really cool things that this actually also does is helps you with your referencing. So because this permission is related to this function, it'll actually do a get at for you and describe the fact that this ARN is what's used for this function name parameter here. And so this is a really interesting trick to populate your parameters easily. It even does that for the pseudo parameters. So that's things like AWS account ID in the role function. Nice. And so you can take this, you can copy it, and then you can just place that into your stack. And most of the time it'll work. Sometimes there's a couple of different tweaks, but we handle that as we go. Yeah. But you might say, but what if I'm not a CloudFormation user? What if I use Terraform? We've got that too. So we can generate Terraform templates, Troposphere, CDK1 and 2.
I did not know that.
CDK for Terraform, Pulumi.
What? Hold on a second. Where did you do that?
I know. Because I just assumed it was just CloudFormation. So this is game changing for me now. So because I'm slowly learning Terraform, and I kind of default to CDK v2 now. So now that I know this, oh my god, this is gonna change the game.
Yeah. So I'm trying to cater for everyone here. Like everyone has their own preferences. I'm not going to get into debate about which ISE is better. That's going to take some time.
Please do. What do you use? What's your go-to?
I think everyone knows I'm pure Terraform. Pure CloudFormation. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you gave it away there. You know.
CloudFormation or nothing.
Wrong show.
Wow. Yeah. You Freudian slip there.
Yes.
No. So Ian, I'm curious. What was the hardest bit of building this? How do you generate the actual the artifacts there in the different languages? I can't see how you actually do that. That's great. Please tell me.
So, I mean, the longest part, not necessarily the hardest part of creating this, but the longest part was mapping each individual type. And Forma 2 doesn't use any of the things like the new CloudFormation Cloud Control API. It uses pure get and list calls. So the way I do generate this Lambda function, for example, is that I would have a service that goes and lists my functions, which you saw which generates the table, and then get function attributes to figure out all this data.
Yep.
And then there's just a simple transform function that says, okay, let's actually do this for reals. The role function here, for example, maps directly to this role output here. And they're not always the same. In fact, probably about 30% of parameters are different in the various infrastructure as code properties. So each property is mapped directly to its infrastructure as code equivalent.
Yep.
Ian, we've got a question coming in from the comments. Can you group resources based on filtering criteria like tags?
Yeah, you can. So because I've done a scan, for example, let me find something that is kind of common in my environment. Okay, so I have, for example, Wildfire, which is a group of applications for a different project. So if I go up here and I type in Wildfire, it's actually going to give me every single resource that has that Wildfire in it, and I can add that to my template. It might, again, ask me for some related resources, and then I can generate that. So it's picked up that there's a API gateway that's related to this function, which is accurate. Has a bunch of Lambda functions, Lambda permissions, some API gateway models, which are methods, which are really complicated to deal with sometimes. So this is a really helpful bit. And yeah, it just basically populates that so you can take that, put it in, and off you go. Pretty easy stuff.
Very nice. Very nice.
Excellent. I hope that answered your question, Tesseract. I think if that's how you say your username. So let us know if that's answered your question. But awesome.
Yep. Cool indeed.
Yeah. So again, this is one of those developer tools. It started off with just me trying to scratch an itch and trying to get something out there, and eventually it just spiraled into something that I really enjoyed making. And I really enjoyed the feedback that the community was giving me as I went through this. Forma 2, as of right now, has maybe 200 and something issues that have been raised. And these are great. So getting the community in saying, I really love your project, but this could be better, or there might be a bug here. It's so helpful to me as a developer to get this feedback. And even pull requests. So we've gone through 51 pull requests.
That's awesome.
And so others can contribute to your project as well.
Do you have a particular...
How many people, Ian?
Sorry,
Derek. I was going to say, how many people so far have contributed to the code other than yourself?
16, including myself, it looks like.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you have a close contributor that you're like, oh yeah, I know this person, I can trust what they're doing? Do you have that sort of relationship with some of your contributors?
There's a couple. I know these two sometimes are pretty frequent contributors sometimes in terms of the pull request. And there's also frequent issue raises. And that's fine too, because that's really helpful for me to track down certain issues. So yeah, it's a really amazing work and help from the community there. Okay, let's move on to something else.
And next, what else have you built?
Yeah, so the next thing I want to talk about is a project that I made. Oh gosh, it's probably early last year. It's going to try.
So Ian, before you crack on, we've got another question.
Yeah, go for it.
The question:
I got it.
What is your CI/CD build automation for these projects? Do you have a standard one, or do you vary them based on the project?
It's definitely varied based on the project. So Forma 2 basically is super simple. In fact, it's just a GitHub action which publishes my resources to an S3 bucket, which is fronted by CloudFront. And that's all Forma 2 is. So you can take Forma 2 and you can host it locally. And that works perfectly fine out of the box.
Awesome.
So you can make sure that your security controls and things like that are fine. And that's how I do development. So I develop locally on localhost effectively. When I'm happy with it, when it's tested, I just commit the code pushes to an S3 bucket. Couldn't be simpler.
Oh, so I have questions now. Now that I know that you develop locally, right? I have questions. What is your stack? What is your? Do you use local stack? Do you use other kind of like tools like that to mock AWS services?
No. I think mocking is a noble cause, but I really think that, especially when you're working with something like this, there's a lot of intricacies that can only be replicated by actually working directly in the cloud. So there's a lot of things that I test directly in my own account and things like that. There's often, because the documentation is very static in the AWS land, I often don't actually test some of these projects. So something like Ground Station, for example, I can't test because I don't have a satellite up there. But I know that this works because the documentation is in line with everything else, and it will scan. So, yeah. In fact, cool. I got an issue just the other day about a quirk in the way that GovCloud works. So, in addition to all the commercial regions, it also supports GovCloud in China. So, there's some intricacies in GovCloud that I was made aware of, and I can fix that for them. But that's something I couldn't test myself because I'm not US government.
Cool.
Yeah.
Carry on. Sorry, apologies for that little side rail there.
That was kind of worms right there. Local development.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, though. It's one of those things that I always battle local versus cloud versus local, and So when someone mentions it, I think, oh, I want to know more. So.
Yeah. Yep. So the next project I want to talk about is IAM Live. IAM Live is an application which generates IAM policies from the AWS calls that you make, and I can show that off live. So if I'm here in my console and I want to understand the IAM policy that a specific call might have, the way I would run that is by running IAM Live. And for this one, I'll just do the terms set INI. And that's running a small server in the background right there. What I can do in my other console is AWS EC2. Let's go describe instances. And I mean proxy mode, so that makes sense. But you can see that the request is coming up there as well.
Yeah.
The reason that's come up like that is because I'm in proxy mode. So let me just do that one more time for you, so you can see I'm not lying.
Nothing to see here. Nothing up my sleeve.
Describe instances. And that's going to work as you would expect. So this is dynamically generating the IAM policy that you would expect to run these commands. So if I did, let's go AWS Lambda, what is it, list functions? You can see that list functions comes up there as well. And so
Ian, like Forma 2, right? So what was the itch you were scratching here? What was the problem that you were trying to solve here?
This is funny because this is actually not what I intentionally tried to create when I made this project. It's actually a side effect of another thing I was doing at the time, which was to do this massive map of API calls to IAM actions. And one of the side effects was that I could do something like this. What I really wanted to do at the time is work on permissions.cloud. Permissions.cloud is another online reference that I've made that will help you map that what you might see as the service authorization reference to the API calls that they entail. So if I want to say, what does, let me go backwards from the API, for example. If I wanted to say, what does appsync.create data source, the API, actually need from an IAM perspective? I can go here and say it needs both IAM create data source, but also IAM pass role for these properties. So it's a really good way of understanding what's going on.
I did not know you had this because this is one of my pain points when I'm doing my CDK apps. Okay, and obviously I'm trying to scope everything down. So I start with nothing, and I build up permissions that way. And you have to go through that iteration of doing the CDK deploy, getting a failure with it because of a permission, and then it basically tells you what to do.
Yeah.
So this would make my life so much easier because I've got a handy reference here, right? So for folks listening, if you're doing that kind of work, then you need to come to this page.
Yeah.
And one of the issues I had initially when I created IAM Live is that the initial way that this worked is that it uses something called client-side monitoring, which is a CLI kind of artifact or tool, which just generates a packet of metrics of what you're calling. But that's very limited in the way that it actually works. And so one of the enhancements that I initially did was to move into proxy mode. And what proxy mode does, let me just clear that actually. What proxy mode does, it actually spins up a local sort of like man-in-the-middle server that you can use to basically take the outputs from your calls, your network calls, and go through this proxy and understand what's going on. The way you do that is to add these exports, so local HTTP proxy and a CA bundle to make sure that it knows that we're proxying, which is why that didn't work earlier. And then you can run that describe, and then that's going to go through as well. What this really helps with is when you want to do something like AWS EC2 stop instances. I'm going to cheat. Instance IDs. Okay, cool. Instance.
I'd be impressed if you could remember the entire line.
Yeah, it's CLI is fun. Am I writing it wrong? No, dash. There we go.
Yep.
And so one of the things that this does, despite the fact that it doesn't exist, is that it can actually pick up the fact that that instance ID is there and start doing interesting things like populating the resource ARN with that resource. Yeah. So you can really scope down and have an idea of least privilege in your IAM policies that come in.
So just a thought, Ian. Right. So let's say, for example, you're building a CI/CD workflow. Can you use this in a way like an inline monitoring tool, so you can actually output the stuff, so that then you can retrospectively look at that and as a report saying, as part of my pipeline, this is the stuff that was being called, and I can then check that against what I've given, so that I can see if there's a delta.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's a side project that has actually been driven through community contributions. If you come onto the areas, things like Docker side project, a GitHub action, so for like that CI/CD style thing, and also a Lambda extension. And these are different ways of running IAM live that will, again, spit out that IAM policy, but in CI or in your Lambda logs, for example, as a real-time execution. So these are different ways of running the exact same thing. The entire app is built as a binary. So your question about how do I release it is I just go git push, and then there's a magical builder that does my releases for me. But because it's a Go application, you can open it up, you can expect it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's pretty easy.
Yeah, we like Go. We like Go applications for that reason, right? They're very easy to distribute.
Easy.
Exactly. Yes. And so the side effect of that is that I had a lot of use out of this that wasn't initially expected. So I think what I could almost confidently say that one of the primary uses of IAM Live now is to create Terraform service roles. So because of the side effect where AWS SDKs emit the exact same usage, what you can actually do is run your Terraform apply in locally and run this sidecar, and it'll actually generate the service policy that would be needed to run that Terraform remotely, for example. So when you go Terraform apply, it's going to do a whole bunch of commands like get and list and create and things like that. And this is going to pick up on all those things. And that seems to be one of the most common use cases for this tool right now, in a way that I never expected, because I don't use Terraform, but you just pick up on these things, and it's really interesting.
But that's actually, I mean, when you look back at the fundamentals of open source and the 4 freedoms, that is actually one of the benefits, right? The fact that people can actually freely use the tool ends up taking tools in unexpected directions. So I think that's a cool thing.
Yep. Now, folks, we are pushing for time here. Shall we go to the next thing that you've built, Ian?
Cool thing. Yeah. So I have one final thing.
There's more. And there's more.
Yeah,
there's always more. There's always more with Ian.
There's one final thing I'd like to show you. In addition to IAM Live, and this is more towards what I was originally trying to achieve. And this is a tool that's in progress. So this is not really publicly advertised, and this is kind of like a bit of a sneak peek.
Oh, exclusive!
I don't have that transition. Sorry.
Oh, we need that now. We need some kind of banner.
Oh.
Yeah. And so one of the things you might be doing when you're, for example, creating an application, you're coding an application and using the AWS SDK, you go through all these things and you have a command. So in this case, this is a simple application. I stole it from the AWS samples page. It creates a DynamoDB service object, makes a bunch of parameters, and does a put item. Now, when you're developing this, you might be thinking, okay, now I need to figure out what these calls actually are and what the IAM permissions are using. You could be using something like IAM Live to do it at the execution level, but I wanted to go one more. And so the way that you could generate a policy from this is to go IAM fast, which is the name of this tool. And I'm just going to target this specific file. So test1.js. And that's going to spit out the IAM policy for this code block. And you can see there that it's understood that there's a port item. It's understood that there's a region involved. It hasn't figured it out because it's got the region thing there. It's actually understood that there's a customer list in the table name. So if we wanted to do, say, change this to customer list 2, I can save that, run it again, and it's picked up the fact that it's customer list 2. So this is a really interesting tool, because what it's actually doing is it's analyzing the code block using abstract syntax trees. It's understanding the fundamental thing of what your code is doing by observing code, and then generating the IAM policies in the same way that IAM Live would. And so, so this is how that kind of works. One of the cool things that you could do with this is not just have this as a command line utility, but also as a developer tool. And so this also comes packaged as a Visual Studio Code extension. So if I wanted to get rid of that and I wanted to just take this from my Visual Studio Code, I have an extension called, which has this little button here. I can say file or workspace, file, and I can even output in different things. So if I wanted to say YAML, it'll spit me out an IAM policy that's just like that. If I wanted to say HCL for Terraform, then it would spit me out the HCL for that. So yeah, really helpful. And if you wanted to go just a step further and you wanted to figure out, well, why is this policy specifically outputting this specific action or resource? What you can actually do, because it's in Visual Studio Code, is right-click on that, go peek, have a look at the references, and it'll tell you where that came from. So it actually drills down back into the original code base and tells you what specific code block is requiring that IAM permission.
Really? That is so cool.
To be present.
I love that.
And so yeah, this is in development. It's not going. Go ahead.
Sorry, Ian. That's only, you can only do that when you're actually using the plugin though in VS Code, right? You can't do that retrospectively afterwards.
Retrospectively afterwards, in terms of
so once you've copied this policy, right, and let's say you put it in your Terraform, then obviously there's no linkage back right to where it is in the code. So this is like this is only something you can do in the tool, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's you could take that same you could take that same code block and regenerate it and figure out why that is, but because it's always going to be the exact same thing, it's deterministic. But yeah.
Quick question, Ian. I've never written a VS Code plugin. Is this your first one? How did you find it?
No. I've done a few VS Code plugins.
Okay.
So let me just done a CloudFormation linting tool somewhere. This is the one from me. I wonder if he'll actually tell me to do this. Oh yeah, there you go. I also made another one called LiveSync for AWS Cloud 9, which allows you to run Cloud 9 instances with live chat in, well, like live cursive positions in your VS Code, which is pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah, played that one.
One to run your Cloud Shell instance, AWS Cloud Shell, in your terminal. So that's pretty cool. Things like that. So.
Do you ever sleep? Do you ever sleep at all?
Yeah.
No. Seriously? But yeah, so this tool, it's right now I have to generate all the logic behind this. It uses a bunch of really complex things called grammars. So this is what JavaScript actually does in the back, and this is how it's actually interpreted. Very complex. Extended back now a form, which is very complex thing, which I learned in uni and promptly forgot and was really annoyed that I had to learn again. But basically, it works for JavaScript. I'm targeting Java. I'm targeting Go. I'm targeting C++. Which was a community contribution, is to get the Amazon state language format. So this is what you would put into a step function.
Yep.
And so you can do the exact same thing there and understand that this is a Dynamo get item somewhere for table boo, like that. So you can figure out the IAM policy for your state machine as an example.
Very cool.
That's very nice indeed. We could probably talk to Ian for a month, I reckon.
we need a part two. We need a part two.
Yes, Ian, would you like to come back on the show sometime and we'll just go deeper?
Of course.
Excellent.
So, just kind of wrapping up this section, Ian. We're going to share the links, okay, for these projects. Do you have like a call to action? Do you want help with a specific area? Do you want people to contribute in this new project, or testers, or how if people listening either now live or maybe a recording, how can they help you and your projects?
So for any of my projects, just go ahead and use them, because I hope they really help you in your cloud journey. If you find bugs or if you have suggestions on the way you improve them, bug reports and things like that are an amazing way to contribute, because I can't test every single edge case and there's a bunch of things that go on. So try it out, provide feedback. That's one of the best ways to contribute. If you really do want to get involved in something like IAMFast, this new one, jump in, make a PR. We'll talk about how this works in the project. And yeah, I'd love to see your your contributions, whether that's a bug report or a pull request or something else.
Awesome. Very inspiring.
Awesome. Very good. I think, Ian, do you want to stick around while we just finish? We'll do the last section. If
Absolutely.
You don't mind, you get some time? That would be fantastic. So that was from Ian. All the information's there. And yeah, wow. My mind's blown. I am fast. Well,
Ian, sorry, Derek, transition time, I think. Transition time.
Sorry, yes, I am.
Focus.
My mind, I'm like, sorry. Okay, let's do it. Yes.
Yeah, so as we hinted on earlier, this is going to be a very quick one because for the purpose of time, we're going to run these regular challenges, and people who participate will be lucky enough to get one of these lovely coins. Very nice, shiny, my precious.
My precious.
And so because we talked about Event Ruler this week, and it is an interesting project, and one of the things I noticed is there was a lack of like demo code there. I'm really interested to find out if folks either watching live or maybe on the recording, take a look at it and maybe come up with some kind of demo. We'll definitely share those demos on show. Derek and myself will share them, but also we'd love to reward you with a nice coin for the best contribution. So that's this week's competition or challenge.
Fantastic. Well, good luck to everybody on the chat, and hopefully we get some submissions and some excellent ones that we have.
So just to clarify, okay. So if you want to know how to participate, then you go to the GitHub repo. There's a GitHub repo for this episode, which we'll share at the end.
Shared. Yeah.
Oh, you shared already. So great. So and basically just put an issue in there with links to your information, and that's how you share your contribution. So I think that's the challenge. I think we're now ready for the wrap up. So I'm not sure if we've got a transition for that.
I don't think we have. I don't think we have, Rick. Maybe we need a transition. Maybe there's two. Can you over transition a show? That's what
you can. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can over transition a show, to be honest. But it doesn't matter. So what we'll do is we'll just wrap up this week. So thanks again, Ian, for coming on and sharing your open source projects. Really inspiring. Certainly taught me stuff that I didn't know, which is super cool. And the new project you've got, going to definitely watch out for that. Now, because this show was a week late, we've actually got next week another show. I know.
Not from Thailand.
Not from Thailand, actually. So I'm going to be in Manchester, actually.
Oh,
so I will be in Manchester, but I'm not sure. You might be back in Perth, right? So
back in Perth. Yeah.
I'm super excited because we have got the Cloudscape team coming in to talk to us about their project. So for folks who may not be familiar, Cloudscape is a UI framework that allows you to create UIs similar to what you get for the AWS console. So they're going to come in, talk more about the project, show us some code, and hopefully we can even maybe do a challenge around to that as well. So that's what we've got coming next week. Obviously, we've got more open source projects and more blog posts to share with you. And also, we've got one final thing before we go. In the newsletter, I have an event section. We cover events. So if you want to see what events are around, also importantly, if you've got an open source event and you want us to publish that in the newsletter, please get in contact so you can reach our audience, which will be awesome, and get more people on your event. And I think, is there anything else?
I'd just like to say, Ian, thanks so much for coming on. Did you have fun?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, great. That's what we want. We want to have fun and build cool open source. So I think we'll play the last transition, Rick, and we'll say bye-bye. And
hang on, but before we do that, we need to share the link for the feedback form. Where's the link for the feedback form?
The feedback form.
We need the feedback form. So if you want this will give you access to the latest newsletter. So we'll get that as a QR code. So hopefully, if we can find it. Is it on the? Is it? I think it's on. It might be on the share. Is it on the share?
Which Derek?
Is it this? Is it this one? Is it that one?
Yes.
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 Way. So as we close, because we're at time,
Professional.
yeah, we're professional here. We'll get better. Please use that to get access to the newsletter, and we'll hopefully see all of you next week.
That's right. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you had fun. And bye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye all.
Bye from you. As Derek looks for the outro. Yes. Go, Derek.